Alan, sometimes shows have after shows or after the show segments. I think this is one of those. I've got questions. The last 18 months, I've probably talked to 600 fractional CMOs, like a lot, mostly because of the podcast, but a lot of fractional CMOs.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in your take on a lot of these questions. We can just jump in and we can do them. So number one, did you, as a business, did you pick being a fractional or interim CMO, or did it pick you 4 years ago?
It 4 years ago, yeah. It picked me. I kind of fell into it. So I was at Serious Decisions in Forrester for 6 years, and I stayed on 2 years after Forrester acquired us, and then I left in February of 2021, and things just happened. I fell into it. It was really coincidences.
Was your first customer someone? This is pretty common. This is pretty common. Was your first came to you and say, "Hey, if you're available, we need some help for a period of time"? Is that how it worked, or did you like start going out into the world and letting people know?
No, well, here's what happened. So first thing that happened. So I left Forrester at the end of February 2021, and I saw one of my past clients, Kevin Ruane, who's CMO at Precisely, was rebranding from SyncSort to Precisely, and he tweeted something out. I said, "Kevin, that's a great name. Congratulations." And he goes, "Alan, can we talk?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Would you be interested in doing some work with me? Working?" I said, "Well, Kevin, I just left Forrester a couple of weeks ago, but I'd love to work with you again." So that was end of February. I left. As of April 1st, I started working with Kevin, the CMO of Precisely, and his team, and did 3 quarterly engagements. So I started that, April 1st, just a few weeks after I left Forrester. So that was the first thing that happened. Second thing that happened is someone I had been networking with for years, and I just started telling people that I left. I hardly told any. I just told a couple of my closest people. And Dwight Griesman, who there are other stories where we've helped each other for years, at least 10 or 15 years. And he said, "Alan, I know you have a lot of experience in health IT, health tech. A past boss of mine is helping this company with all of their sales strategies, and they're looking for someone to help with marketing. Would you mind talking to them?" I said, "Sure." So I spoke to the private equity people, and then the C-suite. And also on April 1st, I started as interim CMO at nThrive, which became FinThrive. The coincidence was both of these companies, Precisely and now FinThrive, were owned by the same private equity investor. Complete coincidence from 2 totally different parts of my network.
Sure.
And now I'm on my 6th portfolio company working with this very large PE investor, and they co-invest with other private equity firms as well. So I just kind of fell into it. And I mean, the interim CMO thing I fell into, I had been a full-time CMO at 7 companies before that. The, mentoring and advising and coaching CMOs, I learned I love that at Serious Decisions in Forrester. And, I mentored over 130 of them over those 6 years. So I started doing that as well because I just love doing that. So that's part of what I do, or helping them with projects. So I have a portfolio of things I do, which is either, mentoring CMOs is one, coming on as an interim CMO is another, helping CMOs and chief customer officers with projects, or helping private equity investors with due diligence. So I just kind of
see if I get this right, though. So was there a point where you were working with Precisely and FinThrive at the same time?
Yeah, on April 1st, 2021.
So then my question is,
I started both. So I worked 1 day a week with Precisely on projects, and 4 days a week with nThrive or FinThrive as their interim CMO.
So, how do you balance? Like you said, like a day a week. Sometimes it's like more, and sometimes it's a lot more. And so, like, how do you balance like multiple clients like that then?
I try to tell clients that, look, Monday is my precisely day. Let's try to schedule most of the meetings on Monday or whatever day it is. And then, Tuesday through Friday are my FinThrive days, and what I've done, I'm interim CMO at $1 billion company now, 4 days a week. And I have some CMO clients, but I try not to do anything more than 4 days a week with one client if it's an interim CMO type role. And that leaves me time for a little business development and also to mentor the CMOs that I advise and coach.
All right. So let's say you're going into a new engagement, a fractional CMO or an interim CMO is going into a new engagement. I'm going to tell you something about me and how I work. I'm not a fractional CMO, right? But I mostly work for you guys. And I'm going to tell you something about me, and then I want you to give me your spin on that for your own thing, okay? I jealously guard and preserve and avoid until it's time to do it, reading a company's existing marketing until I'm ready to start working on it. And the reason for that is I'm only going to get a first impression of them one time. And every time I read after that, it's going to be colored and weighed upon by what I know and what they should do, right? So I have an outsider status, and my job is to preserve that and then capture what I think they're doing and how I felt about it, and right, because because at that point I'm just like a stranger to their marketing, and it's in my life now, and I'm experiencing it. So I have to be very careful, and I'm very careful about that. I don't poke around. I don't do a lot of research. It would be helpful to do the research, but there's no substitute for recording and remarking on and observing how you interact with a company's marketing the very first time you are exposed to it. Now, of course, every interim or fractional CMO is an outsider by definition, right?
Yeah.
And so I might be the only outsider involved in marketing at that company because everyone else is an internal employee or has been working there for a while, inside or outside. And so how does being an outsider help? And does it help more at the beginning or the middle or the end of your engagement?
It helps because I try not to make assumptions.
Yeah.
I am not the kind of person where I'll come in and say, hey, I know things better. I'll come in and listen and try to understand what the strengths are, because they're always positives, and then what the gaps are. Mm-hmm. And then, leverage my experience to be as helpful as I can. And, take a look at their infrastructure, which includes people, process, technology, data, analytics, pricing power, brand strength. Are they a house of brands or a branded house? How do they measure customer satisfaction? Do they act on it?
Can you explain house of brands versus branded house?
Okay. House of brands would be, let's say, a company has acquired a lot of other companies.
Right. Or a lot of other products
that have a whole bunch of products. And the way they market is the product names or the previous company names always go first. Mm-hmm. And they don't really, a branded house would be, you make those company names into maybe product suites if they're well known and they have brand equity, but you really invest on the overall company, and you articulate what the point of difference is for working with the overall company, not just the individual brands. You try to get synergy across those brands and across those acquired companies, but your message and your positioning looks at your main target audiences, the space you're in across all of that, and what your meaningful point of difference is in a way you can articulate with simple words so people get it. They get how what you offer can help them with the problems they're trying to deal with. Does that help?
Yeah, let me see if I can put that into an example that literally everybody would understand and already know. Okay. Before they came on the concept of combining it all into one suite called Microsoft Office. Microsoft sold 4 different products. There was the presentation software, the spreadsheet, the word processor, and the little database,
Word,
right?
Excel, PowerPoint.
That would have been House of Brands. and then they convert, assuming they didn't do anything else, assuming they didn't have Windows or cloud, right? It's just that, right? But then once they combine it into Office, that, I mean, nobody really buys like, just Word anymore, right? You buy Office.
Yeah, you used to
And
be
so,
able to.
right. So now it's brand, right?
And
now
it's
it's a
not
branded
just
house
Office,
instead of a
it's
house of brand.
Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
It's attached to the Microsoft
Yeah.
brand and the value of the Microsoft brand.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So, have you ever had an experience where you walk in, it's day one, and everything that you wanted and needed was just sort of like, here's a packet, Alan, and it was all there, and you didn't have to go looking for anything or asking for anything or explaining what someone should have been doing, so that you'd have that, or does it not work like that? And there's always always sort
You
of
have
like
to ask a lot of
half-baked.
questions. You
Yeah.
got to, dig down. You have to see what data is available, what persona research has been done. I mean, they're always, sometimes a lot of stuff has been done and sometimes not.
Right.
And, the size of a company isn't any indication of that things are done. I mean, the big companies
Right.
have issues too that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Even figuring out their ICP, their ideal customer profile. I've worked with some very large companies that had a challenge and they brought me in to do that. Like over $1 billion company, so.
Okay. Next question then. How am I going to phrase this? 1 is hardly any or 0 or close to 0, and 10 is maximum. Okay. On scale of 1 to 10, when you, we'll just use you as an example. We don't have to say like any fractional or interim CMO. We'll just say like, when you show up, right?
Yep.
How nervous should the marketing team be, and how nervous are they actually? 10 is maximum nervous. They should be, or they are, even though they shouldn't be. So how nervous should they, and how nervous are they?
Until they get to meet me and understand my style, that I'm not there to,
You're not a hatchet man.
I'm not a hatchet man. I'm there to help. I'm there to, contribute what I know, models and frameworks that I have access to, the experience that I have. I think they're probably more nervous at the very beginning, but once they get to know me, it's very different. And I've developed a lot of relationships that transcend my time as being an interim CMO, where people still come to me for advice and, and I love that. I love coaching and mentoring folks. So I think at the beginning, they're more nervous because it's the unknown, especially if they haven't had an interim CMO before. But it's all how you approach people and value and listen to them and value their skills and look for ways you can help them be more productive.
Okay. Next question. Told you they were going to go by fast.
It's okay.
Hopefully they're not too hard. Now, there are some types of businesses or like general types of marketing where the feedback loop is quite small and short, right? E-commerce is probably the shortest. When it comes to knowing if your marketing is working, e-commerce is probably the shortest. B2C generally tends to be fairly short relative to B2B. B2B, you could a prospect could encounter your marketing for the first time on January 1st, and that company doesn't buy until July of the next year, right? There are lots of, I work mostly B2B, you work mostly B2B, mostly enterprise companies, right? The sales cycle can be like 2 years long or longer. And so when you're in marketing and you're interim as a CMO or a fractional CMO, how do you know you're winning? I guess is the way I want to put it.
It depends. It depends what the objectives are.
Yeah.
I mean, when I've helped companies with, say, Net Promoter Score 3.0, implementing that, and they've seen results within 6 months in their, industry scores, and they've seen an improvement in customer satisfaction and improved net revenue retention, you're winning something there. In terms of, long selling cycles, generally, assuming companies have done a good job defining their ideal customer profile, you look for signals like, when you look at metrics, there are different types of metrics. There are activity metrics that shows how busy marketing is, and that's
Right.
not something the C-suite's interested.
No.
There's output or result metrics that show what the outputs are of those activities. Then there's impacts like net promoter score, revenue, bookings, etc. If you are an enterprise company and you're, and you have a long selling cycle, you want to engage companies, you want to engage prospects. You probably have some kind of account-based marketing motion. And engaging some of the people at target companies is an output of your activities. You may not be getting revenue from it yet.
Sure.
And, looking at nurture flows and the response you get from nurturing people, looking at, how much of buying committees you have engaged are all kind of things you can look at along the journey. But I think it's important for companies, especially enterprise companies, to understand the buyer's journey, understand the different touch points, both marketing and sales across that journey, and have some metrics that let you monitor that as best you can. It's also who you target. I mean, you can have you can look at total addressable market, which is really broad, and then your total relevant market, which gets down to the ideal customers you're trying to drive, and then accounts that are in market. If you have intent information and you can see people are coming to your website or your competitor's website looking for the types of products and services you offer, that's a leading indicator as well.
All right.
That's a tough question, but and the other thing is B2B is multi-touch. So it's not first touch or last touch attribution. That doesn't get you very far. So you have to look across those touches. What companies can do sometimes is do a deal postmortem. If you look at 50 deals, let's say 25 you won and 25 you lost, and you look at what the touch points were in the won versus lost deals, and you see a difference there, that can give you some element of where you're being successal. Does that help? It's a difficult question, but
it's a deliberately difficult question.
Yeah.
There, broadly speaking, there are two types of roles for interim CMOs. Okay. There's the situation where there is already a full-time CMO, but that person has a sabbatical or maternity leave, right? And I imagine the job in that case is to first, almost like a doctor, right? Like first and foremost, do no harm.
Right.
And then there's the other one where they're going to hire or trying to hire, or they plan to hire a full-time CMO. And in the meantime, they need like a full-time person or almost full-time person at the helm.
Yeah.
To like implement, to figure out, to solve, and then execute. Right. And so if you're the kind who executes, what sort of things do you at the end of, let's say, like a 9-month, let's give our fictional interim CMO like a little bit of runway. At the end of 9 months, like what typically has been changed or transformed from day 1 to day 270?
Yeah, typically, and I can give you an example in a minute.
Yeah.
Typically, it's the organization design, it's the marketing technology stack and demand process. If that needs to be updated, it's service level agreements between marketing and sales. So marketing qualifies leads to a certain extent,
right?
And then given that level of qualification, sales will follow up in a certain period that makes sense for leads that come in. It's defining a short-term mitigant plan and a longer-term growth plan. I'll give you an example where this is a situation where I was interim CMO for 6 months. Then I stayed on another 14 months and pivoted from being the interim CMO to the mentor, coach, and advisor to the CMO they hired. That was at Vinthrop. I have another case study on that that's on my website, but in my LinkedIn profile. But there, I started a lot of things. I got, a short and long-term plan approved by the board. I set the organization design, helped them rebuild the MarTech stack and demand process. later on, I helped them with Net Promoter Score. That was working with the chief customer officer. But then I started mentoring the full-time CMO, and she said, "Oh my gosh, and I'd known her before that, a lot of this thing was, a lot of this is already set up for her to be successful, and I helped her implement the things that I put together in the first 6 months, and that helped the full-time CMO hit the ground running." And I love doing that because once you make that investment in a company, you feel a relationship with them and you want them to be successful. So that was an example where I pivoted from being the interim to being the coach and mentor and advisor to the CMO. And then that developed to working with a chief customer officer where I helped them between the customer organization and marketing implement Net Promoter Score 3.0 and greatly improve their scores in terms of their, the customer experience that people were telling them in their industry comparison to their competitors that industry analysts were measuring.
All right. Now, I'm going to ask you that question again and a shorter answer.
Oh, all right. I didn't answer it well.
It was long and it needs to be, there's like a pop-up on the screen that I noticed that I took off.
Yeah.
It was only there for a moment. But still, it'll for Hernan and stuff, it'll be better if we just make another clip.
Okay.
All right. So you start on day 1. We'll figure 6, 9, 12-month engagement, right? Yeah. At the end of that, when you look back, you've exited because there's a full-time CMO and so on, been hired. Yeah. So you exit at the end of that long-ish kind of engagement.
Okay. Right?
Something's been transformed. Something's been changed, and now it's better. What is it?
Their brand, their messaging, their organization design, marketing's impact on the customer experience, and service level agreements between marketing and the other organizations like sales, product, finance are more aligned.
Good. All right, Alan. Interim CMO, fractional CMO. There are easier ways to make a living, right? You could be like a CMO at a little tiny regional company, just like show up at the same time every day and leave at the same time every day. Every month or a year or quarter kind of looks like the same, right? Like this is not an easy job. Why do this job? Right? Why? And do you have any tips for people who are thinking about going into this role about how to handle the work-life balance, the pressure, the expectations, why do this job, and tips for newer people on how to handle it?
I do it because I like it, because for me, it's fun. I do what I'm passionate about. I love mentoring CMOs and I love, being an interim CMO and mentoring people and the C-suite and the marketing team. I find it gives me more variety, more flexibility, and I can help both companies and people, which I love doing, versus being tied to one company. And, right. I just find it more interesting. What I would advise to folks looking to do this is decide what you want when you grow up. I mean, do you want a full-time job? And if so, why? Or would you like to go down this path and and have an adventure and do different things and build a brand, build your company, build your own brand, which is, I think, more fun. You could also be a fractional or interim CMO for one of these large organizations. If you don't want to focus on, building your own business, but, get some help from another brand. And, some people go down that path as well. But I think it's most important to decide what you want to do and then go for it. It's hard to do both. If you're looking for a full-time role and you try fractional, I'll do fractional while I'm looking for a full-time, then where are you? I mean, it takes a lot of effort to find a full-time CMO role. So yeah, if that's what you want, you should probably focus on that.
All right. And no tips? You don't have a special kind of meditation? You don't drink a special kind of coffee? You don't use tools that you think a lot of people don't know about yet? Or just advice like don't chill out, man. It's just marketing.
Yeah, it
It's
is
just a
marketing. I mean,
job. There'll be another one.
I do it in a lot of industries now, a lot of tech related industries, a lot of SaaS software models. Not only health IT, but HR tech and fintech, and I'm doing some cybersecurity and data, and it's.
So tips
I
on
guess
handling it.
what's that?
A tip on handling it for someone new.
What I would say is think about your career, and there are two things that are important. Number one, think about the problems you've seen over and over and over
Right.
again that you've solved and you know how to solve. A lot of companies have similar problems that you could be solving. Number one. So try to figure out what that is. And that helps you figure out who your ideal customer profile would be. What business are they in? What segment? What size of companies? And once you do that, then leverage your network to find those opportunities. And if you bring those two things together, you can monetize your experience very nicely.
That reminded me of a quote. You've ever seen the show Mad Men?
A little bit, not much.
There's a scene where it's sort of the junior up and coming copywriter is talking to the head of creative, sort of like, the head copywriter.
Yeah.
And she's talking about like, are we like proud of this work? Is this like artistic enough? And he says to her, "You're not an artist, Peggy. You solve problems." And I say that line to myself fairly often throughout the year. You're not an artist, Dean. You solve problems.
We solve problems.
Right? I solve problems.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep. I even have a process for doing that. We solve problems.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you ever find that the portfolio company and the private equity company that owns them are at odds about how to approach something around marketing?
A couple times. I mean, some private equity firms really like to be involved in the brand name if there's a rebranding. And people can be wanting to be very involved and opinionated about what names, they like or not like. And, that's some back and forth. But you can always mitigate that. I mean, just be reasonable with people, common sense, and it'll work out in the end.
Eventually, you're going to exit and the company needs to keep going, right?
Yep.
Ideally, they've found someone, and they found someone at a point in your engagement where there was enough overlap before you cycle out.
Yeah.
Right. How do you make sure that transition is smooth? Because isn't the next person going to come in with their own ideas and want to do stuff and undo some of what you did, or is probably too junior for that role, or it's B2B and they came from B2C, or how do you make sure that it's as smooth a transition as you can make it?
I try to spend time with the person coming in and relay as much as I can about what I learned and what I think is important. In an optimal setting, I'll stay involved and pivot to be that person's advisor and mentor to help them be successful. I love doing that, as I did with FinThrive. But if not, then there'll be at least a month, if not longer, period where we spend, that person is going to be learning a lot of new things about the company. So I do my best to make them successful and give them the tools to continue or not continue the initiatives that I started.
Do the private equity companies, when they're talking to you about like possibly moving into one of their portfolio companies for a while, do they ever come with preset ideas about what marketing is or what marketing should do or what you should do? That's part A. So answer that first. Yes or no? Do they typically come with their concepts and ideas around how the marketing should be done? Or is it more of a, hey, you're the marketing guy, I'm not going to tell you, just go do that job?
It's a little bit of both, but I think a lot of companies over-rotate on demand and how much, leads and demand marketing is providing versus all the other things that marketing does that's important.
Okay. In that case,
some really, do believe brand is important too. I've worked with
that's actually my next question, not brand specifically, but in the cases where the private equity, the person or people at that private equity company are talking to you about the portfolio company and marketing and so on, what do they typically overrate, and what do you think they underrate for what's ultimately going to become good marketing for that portfolio company? What's overrated in these conversations, and what do you wish was, given more consideration?
I think the demand process may be overrated because a lot of folks, just look at marketing as leads. And I think what's underrated sometimes is the brand, but it depends. Some private equity investors, one I've worked with a lot, really does value brand, and I've helped companies rebrand, a few companies rebrand, and they get the value of doing that as part of the value creation plan that they come on to influence. They're not all that way. I hear some of them don't. They're just focused on demand, and that's a very narrow view of marketing. Right. So if I see that, I try to educate, how marketing should be influencing the organization, and how marketing can be the glue or the convener in chief to bring the C-suite together, and how important alignment is, and service level agreements between marketing, sales, product, and the other functions, finance.
Okay. I got 2 more questions for you, and we can wind it up. Okay. Thanks for your patience and time on this. I appreciate it.
Sure.
One, someone comes to you, you've known them for 15 years, and they say, "Hey, man, Alan, I've been a full-time CMO at 2 different companies now over the last 15 years."
Yeah.
That would be actually pretty long tenure, 7.5 years each as CMOs, a long tenure for most companies. And I want to move out and go on my own, right? What 1 or 2 most important skills should I be working on developing now while I'm still a corporate employee, so that I hit the ground running when I hang up my own shingle?
Yeah, what I tell people is that the longevity of a full-time CMO and interim CMO, they're kind of getting closer together. Yeah. So,
what should they be learning, or what skills should they be trying to develop, so that they'll be ready when they're out on their own as a one-person business?
I think cross-functional alignment, service level agreements between the different functions, getting on the same page, because alignment solves everything and it kills a lot of things. 2, figuring out marketing is not just new leads and new business, but it's also customer-led growth, and the things that marketing can do to influence retention, lifetime value, gross and net revenue retention, advocacy, new advocates, new business from advocates.
Right.
So getting there. And then it's what I said earlier. I think it's combination of what domains, industries, size of companies do you have experience in? What problems have you seen over and over and over again that you've solved in your career? What are the nature of those problems, and who are other companies that would have similar problems? And then getting a really good handle on your network. Who's in your network? Who can you leverage? Who knows the work that you do and would vouch for you? Because you're going to be getting your business from your network, but it's going to be related to your, like any other company marketing, your ideal customer profile, your sweet spot, the problems you know how to solve and can solve for companies, in the type of companies and the domains that you have familiarity with, and leveraging your network to get there, bringing those 2 things together.
Okay. All right. And the last question. 2020 Alan did some things differently than 2025 Alan does today as an interim CMO or fractional CMO. What's the difference?
Well, I started in 2021, so I was full-time in 2020. I was an analyst. So what I was doing in 2020.
Alan 4 years ago and Alan today.
Oh.
Alan today does it differently. Does what differently than he did 4 years ago? Or focuses more on what?
Well, I'm broader in terms of the industries that I support. 4 years ago, I did primarily health technology, health IT, and precisely as a data and software company. In the last 4 years, I've gotten a lot of experience with SaaS software companies of all kinds, asset management.
Is there anything that you were doing or would have done 4 years ago that now you look back at it and say, I wouldn't do that again. I wouldn't take that approach again. I don't think that works anymore. Anything like that?
Not that I can think of.
No.
Sorry, I don't know.
That's okay. It just shows that you knew so much by the time you went out on your own, and there hasn't been that. It hasn't been that long. You're like, hey,
I was, I'm having fun. I mean, I think one thing that might be a little different. I've now done it almost 4 years, so
yeah,
it works. I mean,
yeah.
I'm enjoying it. I like what I love what I do, and I love supporting private equity portfolio companies, whether it's the CMO or CCO or going on as interim. I mean, it's all fun, or helping with projects. It's all fun to me. I like the variety. I like working with different people and different companies.
Let me ask one more question then. What kind of personality traits do you think would serve a new fractional or a new interim CMO really well as they went out on their own?
Humility and a sense of humor.
Anything else?
And
why?
don't come on like you know everything. Come on to be helpful. Come on to add something. Listen to people.
Do you think a lot of people they don't want to seem weak or uncertain, so they come on too strong?
Some people do, yeah. And that's a risk, because that can alienate people.
Yeah.
And this is not the kind of role where you want to do that. You want to, develop relationships with people.
And then how do you think most people starting out should find their first customer, their first client?
They'll come from people you already know. Leverage your network. Tell people what you're looking at. Talk to people, and just to get their advice. Tell them what you're thinking and just get their advice. If they know something, they'll tell you. But have some informational interviews, and then hone your positioning and where you want to play and who you're going to be targeting and who you think might be ideal. And then
do you think people are too broad? Do you think that, oh yeah, I'll do anything you want, Mr. Customer, Ms. Customer? Do you think that's the default, or should people go in narrowly focused?
People should go in narrowly focused on what they.
What are the benefits of that?
The benefits is that once you have conversations with people, you're gonna be more remarkable. Oh, you do understand the problems I'm dealing with. Oh yeah, these are the kind of things I'm dealing with every day. Oh, so you've really helped company A, B, C, D through that. You're going to be a lot more relevant, and you're going to have a lot more value to people if you're narrow.